They joked about her rank, called her staff sergeant, laughed when she sat in the back of the room with no insignia on her chest. To them, she was just another lower enlisted sitting in a room full of officers. But when the final exercise began, and the chaos hit its peak, she said 9 quiet words that froze every man in the room. Unless you outrank a Navy SEAL commander, follow the plan. Before I show you what happened after that line, and how one sentence turned a week of mockery into silence, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon on, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because this wasn't just about a woman proving herself. It was about a commander reminding everyone what real authority sounds like. Fort Halbird didn't look like the kind of place that bred arrogance, half buried in concrete and scrub just west of San Clemente Island. No flags, no ceremony, just chain link fencing and heat rising off gravel like the earth was exhaling. Inside Building 5C, 12 officers sat arranged in a tight semicircle, hand-picked for what the military called a Joint Advanced Leadership Integration Exercise, a simulation gauntlet designed to test cross-branch leadership under pressure that separated the talkers from the doers. Mara Keene stepped into the room at exactly 1400 hours. No ribbons, no visible rank, just plain fatigues and boots that hadn't been polished since her last classified rotation. She walked to the rear, sat, and opened a thin notebook. Her brown hair was tucked under a cap, her face unreadable, name patch absent. Major Halpern, a square-jawed army officer with airborne wings, and the kind of voice that mistook volume for strength, leaned over to Warrant Officer Briggs. Didn't know admin support sat in on the real stuff. Briggs grinned. Probably here to track our emotional intelligence or whatever. Captain Dwyer snorted. If she's intel, I'm a ballerina. The jokes weren't malicious, just automatic. Mara didn't respond. She flipped a page and began writing with a cheap ballpoint pen. At the front of the room, a thin man in a pressed Air Force uniform stepped forward and cleared his throat. Colonel Ames, decorated, meticulous, and the final word inside this crucible. This is not a drill, he began. This is a stress-adaptive integration test built to expose what doctrine can't teach. For the next 6 days, rank is neutralized. Leadership will be observed, recorded, and scored strictly on operational output. Forget who you were before you entered this building. You'll be judged on what you do inside it. Halpern gave a sideways smirk. Sounds like someone's worried about the brass pulling rank. Ames didn't smile. Those who rely on their insignia to lead won't last long here. He turned toward a clipboard. Call sign assignments begin now. You will refer to each other by assigned identifiers only. His eyes found Mara. Candidate Keene, your records are incomplete. What's your last active billet? Before she could answer, Halpern muttered just loud enough for the room to hear. Let me guess. Staff Sergeant, admin track, domestic rotation. A few chuckles rippled through the room. Dwyer winced theatrically. Oof, tough crowd for your first rodeo, Sergeant. Mara looked up, met Halpern's eyes for exactly 1 second, then went back to writing. Colonel Ames, without missing a beat, marked something on his clipboard. Candidate Keene, you're listed under Army placeholder rank. Staff Sergeant it is, pending update. And that was it. The moment passed. The banter became background noise again, as other names were called. But something in Mara's silence held, not confusion or deference, just choice. Calculated, deliberate, controlled. Briggs leaned back in his chair. Well, he whispered to Dwyer, at least we know who not to follow when it hits the fan. Mara turned the page in her notebook again. The pen kept moving. The next morning came fast. Wake up at 0500. Boots on the blacktop by 0530. The heat was already building on cracked tarmac. The air tasted like diesel and dust. Simulated hostiles, role-player civilians, one embedded mole, and a fake casualty hidden inside a bombed-out school building. Candidates would lead the mission one at a time with a rotating support team of 4. Mara sat in the folding chair farthest from the mission tent, cap low, hands still. Halpern led first, predictably. He approached the briefing table like a prosecutor entering a courtroom. Priority's the asset. Civilians get second tier. No point making friends if we lose the objective. He gave orders in clean, sharp bursts, directing the other 14 members like they were subordinates rather than peers. His plan had style. Flashbangs at the breach point, double stack entry, split flank, the kind of textbook approach that looked good on a PowerPoint slide. But 2 minutes into the exercise, his team stumbled on comms, conflicting instructions, misidentified targets, one civilian left behind in a room nobody cleared. Extraction incomplete, the evaluator announced flatly. Asset secured, but protocol failure, code 4. Halpern nodded like it didn't matter. We'll tighten it up next time. Dwyer went second. His style was looser, friendlier. Constant comms chatter, plenty of copy that and stay fluid. He made it through the exercise faster than Halpern, but overshot the evac window by 30 seconds. No asset loss, but 3 simulated civilian casualties, marked in red on the final report. He shrugged during debrief. Can't save everyone in chaos. Then it was Mara's turn. She stepped up without a word, scanned the tablet, ran her finger along the map once, then issued 5 directives. You'll breach on the west side, 1 civilian corridor possible, soft entry. Set an audible trip inside the breach point. Secondary evac runs counterclockwise if primary chokes. I'll mark exits with IR before you go hot. Briggs raised an eyebrow. So we're not doing a dynamic breach? No, she said. You're walking in. If you're loud, I've already failed. The simulation ran smoother than any before it. They ghosted the interior, found the casualty in under 3 minutes. No mistakes, no shouts, no injuries. Asset recovered. 0 civilian compromise. Total runtime, 6 minutes, 22 seconds, the evaluator announced. Mark, technically successful. Colonel Ames jotted something on his clipboard without looking up. Briggs didn't wait for the next rotation. Guess we're meditating our way to victory now. A few of the others laughed. Halpern leaned back in his chair. Maybe she's from the yoga division. Staff Sergeant Keene, master of softfoot breathing. Mara returned to her seat without expression, took her notebook out again, and started reviewing the scenario data, timings, placements, angles of fire. No pride, no reaction. Later, during the recorded group debrief, the candidates reviewed drone footage on a large monitor. Behind the two-way glass, Commander Rudd, one of the senior oversight observers, narrowed his eyes. She's not reacting like an underperformer, he muttered to the control officer beside him. What do you mean? Rudd pointed at her on screen. Watch her timing. The way she moves her hands. That's not a staff sergeant with good instinct. That's someone who's done real field work in places we don't talk about. Former intel? No, Rudd said quietly. That's special operations cadence. She's not here to learn. The officer blinked. You think she's here to evaluate? Rudd said nothing, just kept watching. The officer's mess at Fort Halbird was nothing special. Metal tables, humming vents, the smell of canned chili that lingered like smoke. By the 3rd evening, it had become the unofficial battleground for social jockeying. Most candidates sat in clusters, still in uniform, but relaxed. Halpern held court with Dwyer and Briggs near the middle, arms draped across chairs. Mara Keene sat alone near the far end. No tray of food, just a black mission binder. Its worn spine labeled with digits that meant nothing to anyone but her. She read quietly, pen occasionally tapping the table edge. Briggs noticed first. She's still on that thing? He muttered, nodding toward the binder. Dwyer glanced over and smirked. You'd think she was studying for the bar exam. Or protecting nuclear launch codes, Briggs added, louder now. Halpern leaned back in his chair. Probably her old HR files. Or maybe notes from her mindfulness retreat. That earned a round of low chuckles. Dwyer called across the room. Hey, Staff Sergeant, we're off duty now. You can stop casing the joint for hostile interns. Mara didn't look up. Everything's classified to someone who doesn't understand it. The words weren't sharp, weren't loud, just enough to cut clean through the noise. Halpern froze mid-drink. The grin slid sideways off Dwyer's face. Briggs laughed. But it was slower now, more forced. Guess we touched a nerve. Halpern recovered first. He stood, drink still in hand, and wandered toward her table like he owned the floor. Well then, he said with mock formality. Permission to nap, ma'am? Wouldn't want to offend our covert intelligence officer. The room quieted by degrees. A few heads turned. Conversations faded into half sentences. Mara stood, closed the binder gently. She looked up at Halpern, not defiant, not amused, just steady. You'll wish you'd saved that salute, she said, for someone who earned it. The silence that followed wasn't the shock kind. It was the slow kind, the heavy kind, like a room remembering gravity. She didn't wait for a reply. She walked past him without changing pace, slipped the binder under one arm, and disappeared out the side door before anyone thought to move. Halpern looked down at his drink, then back toward the now empty doorway. Guess someone didn't like the joke. But no one laughed. In the corner, Colonel Ames had paused over his meal. He hadn't said a word all evening, content to let the officers unwind, but now he watched the exit door for a long beat, eyes narrowing, not with suspicion, but calculation. The kind of look a man gives when the pieces on the board stop matching the game he thought he was playing. By dawn, the desert heat was already pulsing off the range. The candidate stood at the edge of the simulation compound, a sprawling maze of mock buildings, dusty alleyways, and partially collapsed structures designed to mimic real-world urban chaos. Painted silhouettes hung in windows, comms towers blinked silently on the outskirts. This was the real test. Colonel Ames stood in front of a folding table, with a map spread across it, lines drawn in red marker. Behind him, a junior evaluator checked tablets and timers. Today's simulation is designated Joint Force Command Crisis, mixed civilian and hostile environment. You'll coordinate across simulated Navy, Air Force, and Army teams under compressed comms. Objectives: secure a compromised embassy liaison, neutralize interior hostiles, avoid non-combatant casualties. You have 25 minutes. Mara had been rotated into Team Delta, led by none other than Major Halpern, who wore his confidence like body armor. She stood off to the side as he took charge. All right, listen up, Halpern barked. We push from the southern breach. Dwyer and Briggs take flank support. Air asset comes in 5 minutes after breach. We light smoke, then move extraction north through Alley 2. Simple. Mara raised a hand slightly. That alley is an intel dead zone. If comms drop, you'll be blind. Halpern didn't even turn to face her. Noted, Staff Sergeant, but we're not planning to lose comms, are we? A few chuckles from the others. Dwyer rolled his eyes. Any other yoga-based insights? No, Mara said evenly. Just terrain math. The timer beeped. They moved fast. Breach team kicked in the southern wall of the embassy mock-up and swept the first floor with practiced formation. Halpern's voice crackled over comms, barking commands like he was leading a parade down Main Street. For 3 minutes, it looked like it might work. Then came the scramble. An enemy role player fired from a stairwell, catching Briggs in the vest with a blue paint round. Simulated casualty. Dwyer misread a civilian's path and called an air asset in too close. Civi KIA flashed across the sim monitor in the observation booth. Then comms went silent, just as Mara had predicted. Halpern's voice stuttered. Where the hell's air support? We marked smoke. Nothing. The alley was a dead zone. The Air Force unit never received the evac order. The role players swarmed. By the end, half the team was marked neutralized, including Halpern himself. One fake hostage remained unrescued, and the alley had become a kill box. In the control room, Commander Rudd didn't say a word. He simply tapped Mara's file once on his tablet and closed it. Back outside, Halpern tore off his helmet and threw it against the table hard enough to leave a dent. What the hell happened? Who called that alley clear? Everyone knew who'd warned him, and who he'd ignored. Mara stood by the rear wall, helmet still on, hands resting on her gear belt. Colonel Ames approached slowly, clipboard in hand. Major Halpern, he said coolly, your team failed all 3 mission objectives. Halpern pointed without hesitation. She stood there and let it happen, said nothing when we committed. She briefed you beforehand. Halpern blinked. It wasn't the time to question the plan. No, Ames said. That was exactly the time. He turned. Next rotation, Keene takes command. A ripple passed through the group like static. Murmurs, raised brows. Briggs whistled softly under his breath. Can't wait for yoga hour, but no one else laughed this time. Mara didn't smile, didn't blink. She just stepped forward and began reviewing the new layout without a word, already calculating angles and timings in her head. Behind the glass, Commander Rudd leaned toward the control officer. They're setting her up, he said. The officer frowned. For failure? No, Rudd said. For revelation. The barracks at Fort Halbird were quiet that night. Not the exhausted kind of quiet, but the confused kind. The slow unraveling of assumptions. Some of the candidates were still processing how a supposed staff sergeant had been right about a tactical flaw they'd all ignored. Others just chalked it up to luck. Mara Keene sat on the lower bunk in her assigned corner, still in uniform. Her boots were cleaned to inspection standard, not for appearance, but because she did it every night, the way some soldiers cleaned rifles, ritual, discipline, calibration. Her binder lay on the mattress beside her, a fresh set of folded range maps and sealed comms transcripts tucked inside. At 22:14, her encrypted phone buzzed once. No ringtone, no vibration, just a single flash from a port on the lower edge of the device. She picked it up and pressed the side key. A voice came through the secure line, flat and familiar. Commander Keene, your cover remains intact. Observation window concludes at 0800 tomorrow. You are clear to proceed with discretion. No password challenge, no verification. They didn't need one. Clearance at that level came with absolute trust or none at all. Mara didn't reply. She didn't need to. The line went dead. She set the phone back on her pillow and exhaled slowly through her nose. Not relief, more like confirmation, the kind that only comes after weeks of maintaining a role so convincingly that even your own bones start to believe it. Across the compound, under a camo net near the fire barrel, Halpern and Briggs were finishing their fourth round of cheap PX whiskey poured into coffee mugs. The bottle had no label anymore, just duct tape and fingerprints. Halpern's voice slurred slightly, but the words were loud enough to carry. Tomorrow she's in charge. He laughed. I can't wait. Can't freaking wait. Briggs laughed with him, flicking his cigarette into the dirt. We'll run her into the ground. Then Ames gets to read the after-action report that says Sergeant Yoga got us all killed. Hell? Halpern added. She might quit before that. Cry misogyny and walk off the field. Briggs snorted. More like imposter syndrome. Except she's the only one buying her own lie. Neither of them noticed Colonel Ames standing in the dark just around the side of the motor pool, arms folded, watching them speak. He said nothing, just turned and walked away. Back in her bunk, Mara opened her binder one last time. She wasn't studying anymore. She was reviewing patterns. Briggs's comms hesitations, Halpern's timing delays, the errors that had repeated across 3 separate simulations. She annotated with a fine point pen, notes like a field commander, prepping for a mission she wasn't allowed to admit existed. Tomorrow, it would all change, and the joke wouldn't be funny anymore. By morning, the heat on the range was dry and mean, a windless furnace that baked the concrete structures and bleached the sky to bone. Inside the simulation dome, the air was cool, and the pressure was silent and sharp. Final assessment day, the culmination of the Joint Force Command course. Colonel Ames stood beside the projector table, rotating through live tactical maps of the exercise layout, a full-scale scenario involving multiple entry points, layered communications, simulated civilians, and staggered hostile contact. It was the most complex scenario of the week. No pre-assigned positions, no one got to coast. All remaining candidates will operate under a single commander, Ames announced. This is an integrated exercise. You'll be evaluated on execution, resource conservation, and leadership integrity. The map rotated and zoomed. Command slot will be held by candidate Keene. A pause, just long enough for it to land. Halpern's head turned sharply, mouth half open. Briggs raised his brows. Dwyer let out a soft scoff that he tried to hide with a cough. Mara stepped forward from the second row, binder in hand, boots quiet on the floor. She didn't react to the stares. She placed the binder beside the map screen and tapped twice. A new layout slid onto the digital table. Her own projection, a pre-planned route, fire team rotations, timed air asset windows, drone recon routes embedded in phase progression. She didn't raise her voice. Halpern, you'll lead Team 2 through the secondary breach here. She pointed. Briggs, comms relay from Tower 6. Dwyer, evac corridor. Maintain visual on alley intersections. That's where we lost contact 2 days ago. I've rerouted civilian markers based on heat maps from the last 3 sims. Briggs gave a half smile. Didn't realize the sergeant got promoted overnight. Halpern leaned on the table. Don't worry, I'll walk slow so you can keep up. Mara looked at him calmly. Unless you outrank a Navy SEAL commander, she said, I suggest you follow the plan. Dead silence. Not a metaphorical pause. Real silence. As if the room itself took a breath and didn't know what to do with it. Halpern blinked. What did you just say? She didn't repeat it. She didn't need to. Colonel Ames cleared his throat. You heard her. The command registered. Not a correction, not sarcasm. Authority. Halpern's mouth opened again, but no words came out. Briggs looked around, suddenly unsure whether he'd missed a memo or an entire briefing. Dwyer sat back slowly, hands off the table like he'd just triggered something live. Proceed with the mission, Ames ordered. Keene is acting commander. The shuffle of gear, tightening of vests, and slinging of rifles began with a different tempo now. Not rushed, not casual, just recalibrated. Nobody spoke. Mara clipped her headset into place and tapped the comms channel twice. All stations, this is ground 1, she said. Check in and prepare for operational call-out. Phase 1 begins on my mark. Behind the two-way glass, Commander Rudd let out a breath he'd been holding since the first simulation. Took long enough, he muttered. The control officer beside him asked, She just gave her rank away like that? No, Rudd said. She gave them a warning. Most people don't realize what happens when a SEAL commander stops playing nice. The simulated combat zone lit up at precisely 0900 hours. 12 candidates fanned out across the compound under Marakeen's command. She walked calmly behind the control post at the edge of the range, headset active, tablet in hand. No barking, no pacing, just controlled oversight, like she was listening to a song only she knew the rhythm of. Team 2, confirm breach point visual, she said. Halpern's voice came back, clipped but steady. Team 2, standing by. Team 3, status on tower uplink. Briggs hesitated half a beat before replying. Tower 6 online, comm stable, pushing drone telemetry now. Copy. Adjust corridor 3, heat index is spiking, move evac route to alley 4. No one questioned her. The scenario had been designed to create chaos. Simulated hostiles rotated through randomized floors. A false civilian with a hidden detonator was mixed into the crowd. The instructors expected at least 2 fireteam collapses and 1 friendly fire incident. Every prior rotation had tripped at least 1. Not this time. Mara rerouted evac traffic before the contact even developed. She marked thermal upticks based on movement patterns nobody else was tracking. She caught one of the hostiles looping for a rear ambush by identifying comm silence from a team that hadn't reported in 90 seconds. Ground 2, you're about to lose rear visual. Turn now, 2 o'clock, breach window, 40 degrees. Briggs spotted the actor just as he broke cover. Blue sim round dropped him in a single shot. In the observation room, instructors had stopped writing. Colonel Ames leaned forward, arms folded. She's not just competent, the control officer whispered. She's predictive. Rudd nodded. Because she's not thinking like a candidate. She's running it like an op. This is standard tempo for her. In the field, Halpern moved with a different kind of energy now. His voice had dropped in volume. He followed instructions without sarcasm. At one point, when his team lost visual on a tagged evac civilian, He keyed his mic without hesitation. Commander,
Permission to reroute east, secondary corridor. Mara didn't even pause. Granted. Flank north, keep formation. Civilians a decoy, hostile hiding under false ID. Paint and detain. They did. The role player was stunned. Most teams missed him completely. Halpern didn't. They cleared all 3 buildings in under 18 minutes. No friendly fire, no lost civilians, no collapsed teams. The only sound at mission completion was Mara's voice. Control Ground 1. Mission complete. All teams accounted for. Simulated assets recovered. Area cleared. Along.
Continuous tone echoed over the radios. Success chime. In the debrief tent afterward, no one said a word for the first full minute. Then Colonel Ames stepped in. Time, 17 minutes, 42 seconds. That's a program record, 0 compromise. All objectives cleared. Evaluation, exceptional. Halpern sat with his helmet in his lap, eyes forward. Briggs looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. Dwyer didn't even look up. Mara removed her headset, unsnapped her vest, and set it on the table. Then she finally looked at the group. Same team, she said. Same scenario, different outcome. She wasn't smug. She wasn't smiling. She was stating fact. Halpern cleared his throat. Navy SEAL, Commander? Mara looked him in the eye, for the first time since the first day. Formerly, she said. Now I evaluate people like you. Behind her, Commander Rudd stepped into the tent for the first time, which, he added, is why you're all still standing. The debrief room smelled faintly of gun oil and scorched cordite, the usual byproduct of high-fidelity simulations. 12 folding chairs, a projection screen on one wall, no windows, no distractions. Colonel Ames stood at the front, arms behind his back, while Commander Rudd reviewed the mission playback from the command monitor. He paused the footage on a top-down view of the final extraction corridor. Clean formation, full control. Every simulated civilian accounted for. You've all completed the Joint Force Leadership Evaluation, Ames began, his voice measured. But not all of you saw the same course. He turned to Mara, who stood at ease by the side wall, binder closed, cap tucked under one arm. Candidate Keene, would you like to clarify your actual role here? She didn't step forward. She didn't need to. Lieutenant Commander Mara Keene, U.S. Navy, Naval Oversight and Evaluation Division, attached to Special Warfare Command, assigned to this course under Embedded Review Protocol for Interbranch Leadership Conduct. A ripple passed through the room. Halpern stared straight ahead. Briggs slowly leaned back in his chair, arms crossed but shoulders slumped. Dwyer blinked 3 times in quick succession like he was trying to reprocess everything he'd seen that week. Rudd stepped up beside Ames. For the past 6 days, Commander Keene has operated under restricted visibility while evaluating cohesion, authority misuse, tactical decision-making, and peer-based behavioral degradation under presumed rank anonymity. His voice was calm, but carried the tone of someone who'd read far too many reports that ended in regret. In short, he continued, she was here to watch how you'd treat someone you thought was beneath you. Mara's gaze passed across the room. Not confrontational, just observational. Some of you made that job easier than others. Briggs swallowed hard. Halpern shifted in his chair, fingers tightening around his thigh. Ames continued. Commander Keene's report will now become part of your formal file. Not because of what you did under pressure, but because of what you revealed when you thought no one was watching. He looked directly at Halpern, then Dwyer. Major Halpern, Captain Dwyer. You are both being reassigned to remedial leadership ethics training at Camp Eustis. 2-week mandatory cycle. No exemptions. Halpern didn't speak. His jaw flexed once, but nothing came out. Warrant Officer Briggs, recommendation pending, but expect formal review for your conduct. Then he turned back to Mara. You've done what we asked, and more. She nodded once. I didn't come here to punish anyone, she said quietly. But we don't get to lead just because we want to. We lead because someone else is willing to follow us into the unknown. A quiet fell over the room again. Not humiliation. Something deeper. Realignment. Mara stepped forward just long enough to collect her binder. She met no one's eyes this time. She didn't need to. But as she reached the door, Ames called out, "One last question, Commander. You held back all week. Why the silence?" She paused in the doorway. "Because command isn't volume," she said. "It's signal. And the loudest voice rarely wins the fight." Then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and in her absence, the rest of them finally started hearing what she'd been saying all along. The sun hung low over Fort Halbird by the time Mara Keene stepped out of the barracks for the final time. Her duffel was light, mostly documents, a folded uniform, the same binders she'd carried all week. She walked with the same quiet, unhurried pace she'd used when she first arrived, but the weight around her was different now, not one of judgment, just recognition. As she crossed the quad, a few of the candidates stood scattered near the motor pool. No one called out, no one made excuses. But three of them, Lieutenant Hess, Sergeant Maddox, even Private Wallace from logistics rotation, stood straighter when she passed, offering small, wordless nods. And then from the far end of the lot, Halpern appeared. His boots were laced, his gear stowed, no whiskey, no swagger, just a helmet tucked under one arm and an expression stuck somewhere between apology and understanding. He approached her slowly. "I didn't know," he said finally. Mara looked at him, not coldly, just evenly. "You weren't supposed to." A beat passed. No handshake, no forgiveness speech. He gave a tight nod, almost a salute, but stopped short. "Good luck, Commander." She adjusted the strap on her bag and replied without looking back, "I don't need luck. I need people who listen." Then she kept walking. The transport waited near the airstrip, unmarked, military issue. One crew chief, one silent ramp. No send-off, no ceremony, just departure. She stepped aboard, dropped her bag beside a crate, and took a seat near the window. The cabin lights flickered once as the engine cycled. Outside, the last rays of sun lit the concrete like cooling steel. From her window, Mara could see the simulation buildings off in the distance, the plywood walls, the mock towers, the carefully staged battlefields designed to test soldiers who thought they already knew how war worked. She didn't smile. She didn't sigh. She just watched as the engines kicked up dust and Fort Halbird faded behind her. Still standing, still quiet, still not quite ready for the kind of leadership it had just witnessed. The aircraft lifted, and the woman they once called Staff Sergeant Keene was gone. Have you ever met someone everyone underestimated? Until one sentence changed the entire room? Do you think real authority needs to announce itself or just prove itself when it counts? Drop your answers in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story reminded you that leadership isn't about who shouts the loudest, but who others follow without being told, then hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss tomorrow's video. Share this story with someone who's ever been misjudged, overlooked, or forced to prove they belonged in a room they'd already earned. There's another story waiting for you right now on your screen. Watch that one next. And we'll see you tomorrow, same time, with another true-to-life story that reminds us, sometimes the quietest person was never here to impress you. They were here to lead.